Welcome back, Bantwana Benkosi. If you've just joined us, this is Power Talk with me, Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, and on Power 987. We are now going to turn to the proposed bill here in Gauteng that seems to want to create protection measures for township businesses where locals benefit and are a priority. I'm joined by Bheki Twala, who is TECSA Founder and President. Hello, Bheki, and welcome indeed. And thanks for joining us and creating time to speak to us on Power Talk.
Good morning, Doc. Thank you very much for having us. Good morning to the Power Talk listeners.
And I'm also joined by Elias Monage of the Black Business Council, the president. And thanks very much, Elias. Thanks for creating time to speak to us.
So, morning, Doc, and the listeners.
Yes, Elias. Why don't we start with you? What is this bill? Just a quick, basic introduction for the sake of all of us.
I guess for us, this bill, in a sense, it attempts then to bring the township businesses to be incorporated into the mainstream economy. You will recall that some of the issues that for the past decade or so, we have argued around inclusivity to say, how do we include small, medium enterprises and small businesses, both in the rural areas, in the township, into the mainstream? That's one. Secondly, you then have big retail shops that one way or another, they will then come into the townships. And they then exclude number of players in the mainstream. And that's part of the problem that we have alluded to for the past period. Because if by virtue of excluding them, technically they're not going to be part of that inclusivity. Thirdly, you then have a situation where by virtue of them losing their market share, you take a person who runs a bin. If you then bring tops in the township, that person automatically then loses that access into the market. So these are some of the issues that this bill then attempts then to bring them on board. You then bring SPA in the township. It then means they then lose a number of things in terms of participation again into this thing. That creates a major problem because it then means they're not going to participate into the mainstream. So these are some of the issues that this bill attempts then to bring them on board. So
but what are some of the concrete inhibitants for mainstream participation? If you could give maybe concrete examples to those things or the blockages.
Yeah, I mean, the blockages, for example, you then have... let's take Pick and Pay. Pick and Pay then comes and build a retail. There is a mall in the township, in the rural area. It then excludes people participating in their shelf. You don't have any from that township. Tables in terms of even their products, particularly the people who heads or they do creams and lotions and whatever, they're then excluded by virtue of there's a big chain store that comes into this thing, they're then excluded. So the practical step is that if you then bring those big retail shops, you need then to allow the participation of the local people to participate in the entire supply chain. You then look at, for example, the delivered. Let's take Checkers again, another example. They come to the township, you then have anything in terms of shelving, in terms of the participation of the local people in that. You then look at even, for example, the question of the payments that are done now by government on the grants. It then excludes the local businesses. But if you then bring them into into the system, we're then saying to government or to state, by virtue of you paying these people, a certain percentage must then remain in black hands or in the local businesses, so that they're then excluded by virtue of their size and their location. So that's how we then do this thing, so that you then configure and then deal with this thing more better, efficiently and effectively. So these are some of the things that, from our point of view, we are raising, and we continue then to raise, to say this bill must then address those issues as part of inclusive economy.
Mr. Twala, your take on the bill?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very interesting topic. But I'd rather request us to refer it to an act, because it was gazetted on the 29th of April 2022.
Yes.
To an act, and it was supposed to then to be implemented. But now I understand it's under review. But what did the act say? It says 40% of the government spend on goods and services must go to the township. But unfortunately, up until today, we haven't seen that.
How would that look like, though?
Sorry?
40% of what the government spends nationally in the province?
Yeah, in the province.
Must go to the township.
Yes.
How would that look like?
No,
let's say the Department of Education has to buy ball pens. How could it? Is there a ball pen factory in some township?
Now, let me make an example with Department of Health. Let's take, for example, the Baragwanath Hospital. A lot of services that are happening there that we do have people in the township that can provide services to the Department of Health. But we don't see those. But at the end of the day...
Such as what?
For example, that there's a lot of the services, the procurement of the very same stationery, the procurement of grocery and all that. Because remember, there are companies that provide those services. The development of schools. We've got construction companies that are on grade 5, grade 7, that's supposed to get those tenders and those businesses from the township. But we don't see that happening. There's a lot of companies in the township that are capable of providing those goods and services, but unfortunately, it's not happening. As my colleague was saying, now it's very critical. We know we have these laws, but the implementation, it becomes a problem. For example, now we are now saying the retail, and we only talk about only retail. But what about other sectors? Because remember, township economy is not about just only retail. There's a lot of sectors. You've got about 20 plus sectors in the township where, in the private sector, we must look at those private sectors that are operating in the township, but we refer them as the biggest eaters of the township economy, because we are not part of the equity, we're not part of the logistics, we're not part of the shelf spaces, because there are products that are produced in the township that needs to get the shelf space in these big retailers, but unfortunately it's not happening. For example, look at the ShopRite 360. We've got companies in the township that can provide that last mile delivery. This is why we're requesting those partnerships. We are not the gatekeepers of the township economy, but we're the gateway of the township economy as the organization.
And please,
I guess, Doc, maybe let me augment some of the issues raised by Bheki. I think one of the shortcomings of whether it's the bill or the act, it was around three things in the main. One, it was the question of funding, access to funding and access to market. And the third part, it was the reindustrialization. Because if you don't deal with those, you're basically then continuing with the township as for people that are the consumers, as opposed to them reindustrializing and producing some of these things.
But if you, for instance, President, you say you are reserving these activities to citizens, an investor who wants to come open a production inside the township is going to be affected by this bill. Am I correct?
Yeah, but yes. But again, remember...
So how does the economy work when you are saying only citizens can operate in the township. Are you actually not cutting them off from possible
we are
investments?
not cutting them off. Remember, part of let's put aside the question of the investment for a moment. If you then let's look at the current set of circumstances now. All the schools in the township and rural areas, they don't manufacture school uniforms across the board. They don't manufacture school uniforms. All of them, they buy uniform in cities. So
but it's the parents that buy uniforms. It's not the schools,
yes,
no? Okay.
Yes, but I'm saying to you, the parents buy uniform because we don't have any local manufacturer of school uniforms because they don't have access to funding. They don't have machinery. They don't have the funds to invest and build a sewing factory.
That's an international problem because the Chinese, with their incredibly cheap labor on the one hand, on the other, very advanced machinery, they've cut off majority of international textile. It's not a problem of a township.
No. I'm coming to the question of because that one is around the trade issues and the tariffs and all these things. But I'm just saying these are simple things. I mean, if you take, for example, a tunic, in the main, you can then use a cloth of, let's say, 1 meter or 2 meter, depending on the size of a kit. And then if we're then to sew it, you can basically then end up selling that tunic at 160 rand per piece. Okay, I'm just doing simple mathematical thing. And if we then look at that, I'm saying if we're then to have a machine in the township where people, they sew this thing, they buy the cloth in whatever, but then they produce a school uniform and then sell it. Even at 160, they will then make a profit. They're not competing with the Chinese because the Chinese, they're not selling that. But in terms of the cloth, yes.
But President, the Chinese problem is that you are going to get a finished product from China at a much cheaper. And why should a parent buy it from you at 160 when they can get it for 80 rand at Jet, for an example?
No, but I'm saying, the reason why I'm making that example is because I've done the maths and I've done the investigation. And I'm saying to you, if now you then look at a tunic in downtown Johannesburg.
So you will have to purchase the machine for them from China.
I'm saying you can buy a machine from China.
Yeah.
And then they can then
produce it locally.
But
how is that a government problem? Because this is a private, government doesn't buy uniform.
No, I'm saying government, remember, part of the reason government is a government problem because government, in terms of the regulation, that's where it comes in terms of the tariffs, in terms of saying this specific type of a cloth or this specific type of a thing. Remember, in terms of the tariffs, if anything is produced locally, you then protect the local industries.
And does the bill do that? The Gauteng, this act, that will it? In what way will it? In what way will it attract the machinery investment, set up costs?
Yeah, I'm saying these are the gaps that we've identified in the bill, because the bill must also then deal with the funding, the funding and the access to market. Because if you don't do that thing, we are then saying people in rural areas and township need to be integrated, but we don't have a mechanism, we don't have instruments of then bringing them on.
So that's your criticism of the bill. I get it now.
Yes, by bringing funding and all those issues, we're then saying then they can then participate in that sphere. It's the same thing when you bring a major retail shop. If we're then bringing them in the township or in the rural area, somebody must then be in a position then to spinach and then supply spinach every day or every week to that shop coming from the local. But there must be an investment. There must be a seed capital to the local people, because if they don't have the capital, if they don't have the equipment, then it then becomes a problem. It then becomes another tax shop to say we have this thing, but there is nothing else. It's the same thing with the set-aside. You'll recall that the Public Procurement Act, there is a set-aside for 40%, but you don't have the regulation that gives an expression to that. And that's the same thing that the previous act was talking about, the 30% set aside for the local people. But again, following up on the point raised by Twala, Bheki, again, Baragwanath is not only about people buying, supplying them with food, because if, again, we don't have factories in the precinct of Baragwana and neighboring areas like Soweto and so forth and so forth, it then becomes difficult for the Metro of Johannesburg then to set aside specific medical equipment and medical things that is required by Baragwana, so that you can then meet the threshold of the 30%, because the 30% cannot.
It doesn't sound practicable. I don't know, Bheki, but a different aspect is, and you will correct me, it seems to be targeting the reservation of tax shops to citizens. Aren't you going to cut off the citizens that are taking a lot of rent from these tax shops, of the Somalis and the Ethiopians, Bangladesh, and all of that?
Yeah.
How is this an empowerment bill?
No, I think it's very critical, my brother, to really dive deep into this issue. It's not an issue that we can just talk about it in a high level. We need to go deep. For example, the very same act that we're talking about, it also, part of them is a Township Economic Partnership Fund. That was launched, and there were monies that were reserved. But unfortunately, we don't see any impact. What we are saying is, let's empower all people in terms of the tax shops and the spaza shop, so that they are able to run their spaza shop according to the market or what the market needs. For example, that we welcome anybody that runs businesses in the township, as long as people are legal. All what we're saying is that we've got bylaws that need to be implemented. And part of the act, it says, it talks about the local municipality and their participation in terms of ensuring that the bylaws are implemented. Only if government, most especially the local government, implements the bylaws, check, if people are registered, with the recent, COPTA registration of the spaza shop, you will be surprised that it's only a fraction of those spaza shops that are run by our own people. And unfortunately, till today, Doc, we don't see spaza shops being closed that are not, registered. People, they've never registered their spaza shop, but they're still trading as normal. And there is no law that enforces them to go and register.
Well, let's zoom into this. Let's zoom into this aspect of reservation for citizens. I'm trying to appreciate the spaza shop is certainly something that also South Africans are making money from, because they take rentals. So when you say the Somalis must leave the townships, are you not taking a means of income from South Africans themselves?
You remember the reservation that we're talking about?
Instead of just regulating them, but it seems like the Act wants to say local tax shops are going now to be reserved for South Africans. No,
we're talking about the funding. We're talking in fact the reservation of funding. It's strictly for South Africans.
Or for spaza shops.
Yes, for spaza shops. It's about the funding of the spaza shop that is reserved strictly for foreigners. For example, government can't give funds to illegal foreigners to run spaza shops. Now, what we're saying is that we're just saying government must just implement the bylaws. The bylaws are there. The acts are there. You remember we've got all those beautiful acts and bylaws, but the issue is implementation. We are there to monitor and make sure that the government do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Because they've got the power, to do, to implement those bylaws.
Mm-hmm.
As businesses and organized formations, we don't have the power to close spaza shops that are not registered, but government's got that power. We're asking them to do what they're supposed to do. They know exactly what they're supposed
And
to do.
to regulate them, yeah.
And regulate them.
Yeah.
But the issue of reservation, it's strictly for funding.
For funding, the 200, how much is it?
The funding is the 500 billion rand for the sponsorship support. Each sponsorship can apply for 100,000. And then in terms of the stock, in terms of skills development and all that. But the whole amount is 500 million. Then we're saying we're also appealing to the private sector to also come on board and match the government and put another 500. So that it means we've got a billion rand funding for sponsorship support.
Yeah.
It can't be just only government. Also, private sector must come on board. I think that's the reason why now the new request from the MEC from Gauteng to bring the retail on board. But to be honest with you, these retailers are just there, but they're not doing anything for the people on the ground in terms of the CSI program, the enterprise supply development, bringing them on board so that at least they become part of the whole, economy.
Okay.
So.
President, your final thoughts, Mr. Monage?
But I think one of the things for me is that I think this act is very narrow and limited. And I agree with you, Doc, because if indeed you want them to deal with inclusivity, you cannot then have a thing reserved for certain category because we are not then dealing with inclusivity. And if we then talk about the mainstream economy inclusivity, we cannot then say, here is 100,000 for a person, but you want this person then to be included in the retail space, as an example. You want that person then to participate.
So if
in the healthcare.
if I'm baking cakes, I get 100,000. You need to pass a second regulation that Pick n Pay, ShopRite, and all of them must buy those cakes from me first before they bake them themselves.
Yeah, but they're not going to do that, because also me and you, we don't buy those cakes. So if it's a rake, so what's going to happen? So, and that's what I'm saying. This is a narrow, limited way because it still pigeonhole people in the township.
It keeps them there.
So I mean, the architecture of our economy is not on the right trajectory. This national dialogue must then talk about the economic issues. And as a country, we need them to be sober in talking about inclusive economy so that we move away from this thing of pigeonholing and proceeding on the apartheid trajectory that we want them to keep people in the township, in the rural areas. We are talking about inclusive economy. We want then people to have things go Santini, go Pretoria, go Menglini, and various other places, so that you then do this thing. And this thing, Yauri, we need them to have this spaza shop and compete with the Pakistan and other people. It's not going to make us millionaires. It's not going to make us to be part of the mainstream economy because it's basically putting us aside. And I mean, to this day, despite the fact that the Public Procurement Act, we don't have, it entails the set aside for women, the youth, people living with disability, but you don't have regulation. On its own, it then tells your government is not serious in terms of dealing with the inclusivity, inclusiveness of the economy, where black people, they historically excluded majority of the people, they're included in the mainstream economy. So these are some of the issues that we cannot then pass. It's just like a patch for us. It's like somebody's broken, then you just put a patch. And you're then saying, let's just look at the entire architecture of the economy and then talk about a proper, efficient, and effective inclusiveness so that people that then excel. We cannot then have a situation where after 31 years, we still want then people then to remain as a small, medium enterprise, micro, not even micro.
Okay,
it's on the
gentlemen,
coming doc
I don't
as
have
well.
time anymore, and, Mr. Bheki Twala. Maybe we'll set up a whole hour to get to the bottom of this discussion. I think it's certainly not just important, but urgent, and how to break South Africa to become a single economy, not an economy for people of reservations and an economy for the rest. But
No, we'll appreciate that.
well, yeah, thanks very much. That's Elias Monage and Bheki Twala. Thanks to both of you for creating time.
No, thanks, Jock. Thank you.
Thank you.